What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero, because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Monday, September 17th, 2018, start of a brand new week of all kinds of weird things that are going on here. And well, let's get into it. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, and ready to answer the phone when you call on in, put you on the air with your comments and questions. Getting on in here, we're still dealing with the aftermath of Tropical Storm Florence, and apparently over at the Brunswick Nuclear Plant in Southport, North Carolina, there has been a declared state of emergency. And this is apparently they had what they call a hot shutdown, which sounds like the reactor was scrammed. And they're saying the two reactors are now shut down and are safe, but there is an emergency apparently. Floodwaters have been intruded onto the site of the nuclear reactor. There's only one road still available where people can get in and get out. And obviously the concern is that if the flooding gets into discarded reactor fuel rods, there could be an issue. So they're keeping an eye on that. Meanwhile, as bad as Florence was, the aftermath continues to be a major problem. Rivers are continuing to rise from the storm surge and storm runoff. It's still pounding North Carolina. The predicted track of Florence, it's going to turn hard to the north and head up through New England. And so we're going to be watching that as well. Over in China, they are having a major problem with Typhoon Mangkhut. It's been called the King of Storms. It ravaged Hong Kong. It's killed a lot of people in the Philippines from triggering landslides and mudslides. And now, of course, it's traveling across China. And that one, the core wind speed was 142 miles per hour. So it was actually much, much worse than Florence. Okay, let's turn to the war zones here, because apparently the Syrian port city of Latakia has been attacked by missiles from the sea. And they're not sure who launched them, who owned them, where it came from. But the attack targeted the Technical Industries Agency headquarters, which is owned by the Syrian military. And there were reports of powerful explosions heard in the city. Now, over the weekend, you should probably remember, Israel attacked Syria as well. They attacked Damascus with a missile attack that was thwarted with S-300 missiles. So we don't know what was used this time, how much damage has been done, but it's obvious the aggression is continuing. Let's just put it that way. Okay. The Syrian army has dispatched more military convoys to the Idlib battlefield. They're ramping up on what's going on there. But there's been an interesting little development. First of all, Turkey has agreed to cooperate with Russia on eliminating the terrorists in Idlib. This is coming from Erdogan. And apparently they've been holding meetings and talks between Erdogan and, well, he's going to have a talk with Putin. They're getting together. But it looks like Turkey is now aligned with the anti-terrorism forces. Meanwhile, there's talk now that Syria and Russia may not go into Idlib following those talks by Putin and Erdogan, because they're talking about a buffer zone. They're basically saying, okay, we're going to let the U.S.-backed terrorists have Idlib. We're going to put a demilitarized zone between the militants and the government troops, and everything is just going to stay there, which is going to look, it's a stalemate. I don't know how stable that's going to be, but it basically eliminates the threat from the U.S. to go on in and attack Syria and Russia if they attack the terrorists in Idlib. So Putin has once again proven he's a statesman. He's found a solution that avoids conflict. Now, of course, The wild card here is if the U.S. goes on in with a false flag chemical weapon attack and escalates the war themselves. And, of course, the other wild card is the terrorists in Idlib, whether they're willing to just sort of hunker down and sit there for a while. Okay, we're going to go ahead and grab a phone call from Jim in Chicago. Aloha, Jim. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. A couple of things regarding Brett Kavanaugh, the nominee to be the next Supreme Court justice. This young lady that's coming forward now, I don't know if it's true or not, but at least they should allow her to speak to the Senate committee to find out what exactly happened, if anything happened at all. And the other thing, which I find very disturbing about Brett Kavanaugh, how in the hell do you obtain or get a $300,000 gambling debt taken care of?
I'm sorry, whose debt was this?
You know, the Supreme Court nominee.
Okay, Kavanaugh had a $300,000 gambling debt that just went away? I hadn't heard that.
Yeah. You have not heard that? Yeah, they were talking about it all last week, and it's something that a lot of people don't want to focus on, but he had a $300,000 gambling debt, then within a month it just went away. And I find that very strange, considering he only makes less than $200,000 a year.
Okay, well, first of all, I understand that this young lady, well, she's not young, she's 51. She is going to be testifying before Congress, but apparently there are already some serious discrepancies with her story, and it turns out that Kavanaugh's mother was a judge who ruled on the foreclosure of her parents' home. So she's got an axe to grind. And she's a social justice warrior. She's hard left. Apparently, she spent this last weekend deleting all of her social media history because it's very obvious she's extreme left wing, and there's a political motive clearly at work here.
Right, and I did not know about her mother. Where'd you find that?
It's actually all over the news today, and we've got several articles about that at the front page of whatreallyhappened.com.
Okay.
But apparently, you know, this woman didn't report the alleged assault at the time it happened. She supposedly told her therapist about it some years ago without naming Kavanaugh, but the details she gave the therapist are different from what she has come forward with today. So there's another discrepancy.
Right. But getting back to the gambling debt, doesn't that open a door for maybe blackmail, if that is really true?
Well, we'd have to know who it is who paid off the gambling debt.
Right. Okay, then. All right, well, Michael, you take care.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here, and the phone lines are open again. Now, we're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. Interestingly enough, there is a theory being floated that Russia, following the U.S. model, may declare a no-fly zone over all of Syria. And there would be nothing to prevent them from doing that, and they would say that only Syrian and Russian and Turkish aircraft would be allowed into the airspace, and anybody else intruding runs the risk of being shot down. Now, the U.S. can hardly complain, having used no-fly zones over Iraq and various other countries all over the world, but Russia could very clearly do that. And any U.S. planes or Israeli planes or NATO planes venturing into the no-fly zone would run the risk of being shot down. Meanwhile, we're seeing both the Russia and the U.S. continuing to increase the number of warships they have in the eastern Mediterranean. And in a sign of the growing closeness between China and Russia, China has now ordered their navy to support Russia in Syria. So China is stepping on in there as well. This in the aftermath of those war games that sent a clear signal. China and Russia are going to team up. Now then, Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger went on TV and was basically lashing out at Hawaii's Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard for her controversial decision to meet with Assad back in 2017. And then he referred to Syrian President Bashar Assad as the butcher of Baghdad. Okay, Congressman, Baghdad is in Iraq. Assad is the president of Syria. It's two completely different countries. Boy, oh boy, is that the best that we can get into Congress? They don't even know their geography. The United Nations envoy is visiting Yemen, and it is a humanitarian disaster. People are down to eating leaves off of plants there. And Saudi Arabia, of course, is intensifying its invasion and its attack on Hodeidah. Apparently, yesterday, Saudi warplanes killed 7 civilians, including women and children, in Baida, attacking the central Yemenese province town of Radman. 8 others were wounded in the attack. So it is an absolute humanitarian disaster. If the Saudis close the port of Hodeidah, it's going to be very difficult to get any kind of humanitarian assistance in there. Now, I'd like to remind everybody, of course, that starvation of a population, of a civil population, intentional starvation of a civil population is a crime against humanity. It's considered a war crime, but that seems to be what Saudi Arabia is getting ready to do. Okay. Article coming out of Press TV. Zionists like Sheldon Adelson pushed Trump to pull out of the Iran nuclear deal. And this is coming from James Fetzer, who is a political philosopher, and he was being interviewed on Press TV. And Fetzer said that Trump pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal for no good reason whatsoever. And I'm perfectly in agreement with that. U.S. intelligence services on several occasions, including the Mossad, had confirmed the Iranian government was not pursuing nuclear weapons. But all of this came out of Adelson, who's this billionaire casino owner, and he's a Republican Party funder, and he's one of Trump's strong backers. And he just said, pull out of the deal. We want to go to war with Iran, pull out of the deal. And Trump said, yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir. Now, a senior member of Parliament is warning of Iran's tough response to the EU's defiance of the JCPOA undertakings. This is coming from the chairman of the Iranian Parliament's Nuclear Committee, Moshtaba Zanur, underlined that the European states should take practical steps to protect the 2015 nuclear deal or face Tehran's tough and unprecedented reaction. Now, what's going on here is that the U.S. is putting tremendous pressure on the other signers of the nuclear deal for them to pull on out and join with the U.S. in imposing sanctions on Iran. Now, Europe doesn't want to do this. These other countries don't want to do this because every time they go along with another program of U.S. sanctions or tariffs, it hurts their own economy. And they're really kind of getting fed up with that. So Europe has been resisting the arm twisting, but Iran is obviously concerned that at some point the United States throwing more sanctions on Europe might convince them to basically change their policy. Right now, as far as Iran and the rest of the signatories to the nuclear deal are concerned, it's still in place. And the IAEA has confirmed time and again, Iran is fully in compliance with the nuclear deal. But of course, if the deal falls apart, then Iran could go back to enriching uranium and possibly looking at the development of nuclear weapons for real. So it's a very, very tense situation. The Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif is warning Tehran could move to increase uranium enrichment if the EU does not take action in regard to Washington's unilateral withdrawal from the 2015 Iran nuclear deal. Basically, Iran is saying that Europe needs to help support Iran's economy in the face of these U.S. sanctions. Trump is trying to get the world to stop buying Iranian oil by November. And oil amounts to basically 1/3 of Iran's entire economy. So Iran is saying they need help, and they want Europe to step on in. They want the rest of the signatories to step on in and help them with their economy to try and basically defang the U.S. sanctions. Now, the new Speaker of Iraq's parliament, Mohammed Rikan Hadid al-Halbusi, is praising Iran's role in the country's liberation from terrorist groups and said, in the era of unfair sanctions against Iran, the Iraqi nation will side with the Islamic Republic. Now, that is a major, major deal there. It's basically signaled that the United States has, in fact, lost control of the Iraq government. Now, there's another article over here. This is from realyom.com. Conceding defeat in Iraq, the U.S. has only itself to blame for Iran's growing influence in the country. And, yeah, people have an instinct to support the victim of bullying, and the United States is seen as being a bully in the Middle East, and Iran is being seen as the victim. Now, Sarah Huckabee Sanders blamed proxies of Iran for recent attacks at the U.S. consulate in Basra and near the American embassy compound in Baghdad's Green Zone, adding that Iran did not act to stop these attacks by its proxies in Iraq. In other words, they don't have any proof that Iran actually had anything to do with this at all. The new model is, well, if, Iran should have stopped it. Iran should have stopped the attack. Now, that's just way out there. They're basically going to blame Iran for anything bad that happens in the Middle East from now on. Oh, it's Iran's fault. Well, they didn't do anything, but they didn't stop it. That's the new talking point here. But Iran is becoming more influential in the Middle East. People are looking to them for leadership. I mean, Iraq got smashed up by the United States. And people in the Middle East are looking for somebody around whom they can unite to stop any more of these U.S. aggressions. That's what's going on here. All right, we're going to take another phone call here. This one from Joe in Tennessee. Aloha, Joe. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I'm just enjoying this farce with the Kavanaugh whole incident. I mean, I got to tell you, I never really liked this guy because of the connection with the Vince Foster. And when I was watching his hearings, it seemed like he was constantly bringing up like his mom, his daughters, the basketball team, the female basketball team. You know, he just was harping on I had more women assistants and clerks than anybody. And I was always wondering, like, it seems like he's overcompensating here. And I wonder if they knew that Dianne Feinstein had this up her sleeve, because it just struck me kind of like he was overdoing it. You know, it was like, oh my God, here's the female basketball team that he coaches. You know, and it just, I don't know, it did strike me as odd. But I got to say that this whole farce, for a guy that like is really upset with the institutional corruption of our government, it's actually going to work to my advantage anyway, personally, in that it shows what a farce and disgrace this whole system really is. And it's a win-win. You know, I mean, I personally, Trump should have picked Amy Barrett, and then he wouldn't have to be dealing with this to begin with. But I'm going to sit back and have a few laughs. Hopefully they do the helter-skelter tactic, like with all those hysterical women screaming during it, and just show themselves to be a bunch of fools. Now, as far as the politics of it, the women that were against Trump and against Kavanaugh, there's not going to be much of a change.
Okay,
so it's
Joe,
all going to be about the independents.
Joe, I'm sorry to cut you off, but we do have to take a commercial break here, and we'll be back with another phone call after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And we're going to go right back to the telephones to Mo in Florida. Aloha, Mo. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. I just thought you're the perfect guy to talk to. I'm not computer savvy like you, but I heard something today that just made me want to throw in the towel. I hope we, I don't want to give up on anything, but do you know who Michael McKibben is, Leader Technologies?
No, I do not.
Well, he was claiming that the Clintons stole his patents, and but anyways, this American intelligence media. Are you aware of their website?
No.
Well, anyways, they were discussing this today that the Clintons have the encryption keys to every computer out there on the planet, basically, and they can get into anybody's computer, with these encryption keys, and it kind of explains why they're on top of everything before, they know what's happening before. They can get into the FBI, Lockheed Martin. I don't know. This just blew me away. I don't think it's, it's something that, this is not made up. But it kind of
they don't
everything.
need encryption keys, plural. The Microsoft operating system has been backdoored, going all the way back to NT, and that was revealed because when they put out one of the cuts of NT for developers, they forgot to strip out what's called the symbol table information on the executable, and they revealed that in addition to their own internal cryptographic key, then there was also an NSA key, and I presume that the same thing has been done for the Macintosh operating system. And so all anybody needs is that one key, and they can bypass the cryptography of any system that's out there. As far as logging into the computer, we know that there's all kinds of backdoors out there. Do the Clintons have them? Yeah, maybe. Do I think Hillary Clinton is a computer whiz? Not really, considering the way that she set up her private email server. I don't think she's a computer expert, but we do know that short of writing your own system of encryption, there's no way to guarantee your privacy with anything on your computer or online.
Yeah, I know she's not a computer expert, but she's on top of the information before anything comes down, which could explain why. Why a lot of these people end up missing, or the files are erased, or whatever. But they claim it started with Rose's law firm and this whole patent. She was a patent attorney, and evidently she got a hold of this stuff, and she can get in any computer, whether it's Comey's or one of the major military industrial complex computers. And I just thought it was something I didn't know. Which would explain why everybody's, even congressmen, they're all compromised. She got the goods on all of them.
I mean,
that's why she hasn't gone to jail.
I have a question here, which is this Imran Awan situation. The Awan brothers, they were caught breaking into the computers of members of Congress, and he's not going to be charged. And I want to know, was he running his own intelligence operation inside the Capitol building, or was he aligned with Hillary Clinton, who I think was basically selling U.S. government secrets to foreign interests using that weak email server to send the data and that charitable foundation to collect and launder the money?
Yeah, those are the ones that they just took off and left everything sitting in a garage, weren't they?
Well, no, actually they were throwing stuff out, and a neighbor spotted it with the little stickers on their property of the U.S. government, and that's who basically turned Imran Awan in. If it hadn't been for that, nobody would have ever known that this was going on.
Well, I think, whatever it is, you wonder why they just seem to be on top of everything, and nobody could commit that much criminal activity without having the goods on on just about everybody that matters, including judges and congressmen. So, but I'm like you, Mike. I can't wait. That's one perp walk I'd get out the popcorn for, But thank you so much. I'll let you take your other calls.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to let you go. And yeah, there's absolutely no question. There are certain people within our political structure who are untouchable simply because they're able to blackmail the rest of the government. In the case of the Clintons, I think a large part of that is blackmailing the Central Intelligence Agency over its gun and drug running out of Arkansas back in the 1980s. So it is a sad state of affairs when we realize that there are politicians who are above the law and untouchable and cannot ever be taken to court or thrown in prison. I'd like to see that perp walk myself, especially after what the Clintons did to Claire and my life all those years ago. Anyway, we're going to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And before we go back to the phones here, I've got a little update on that allegation that Kavanaugh has a gambling problem. Apparently, it originated solely in a question that was submitted to Kavanaugh by Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, who's a Democrat from Rhode Island. And basically the question was, have you ever reported a gambling loss to the IRS or sought treatment for a gambling addiction? To which Kavanaugh said no. And apparently the issue of a debt of some $200,000, not $300,000, Kavanaugh explained that away because his wife and he own a second home that needed renovation. They bought it as a fixer-upper, and they spent the money to basically renovate it. And now, of course, it's an asset, and that's why the debt has disappeared. So okay, I'm trying to remember who was that lady, Anita something, that was used to try and derail another Supreme Court nomination. Something about a hair on a can of Coca-Cola or something. This is more of the same thing. And asking these kind of questions, I mean, this is like, have you stopped beating your wife? And right now, Kavanaugh has released more documents for the scrutiny of Democrats than any other Supreme Court nominee in history, and still the Democrats are out there saying we need more, we need more. So again, apparently left-wing media like Huffington Post and Salon ran with this gambling story as if it were true. But right now, in the absence of any actual factual information, it's another nothing burger from the party of the nothing burger. All right, let's take a phone call here from Don in Iowa. Aloha, Don. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Don, are you there? I am not hearing Don.
I'm here.
There you are. Okay. So what's on your mind today?
What they're saying now is Chuck Grassley says they will hold the vote on Kavanaugh on Thursday, despite the decades-old accusations. So that's good. If they go ahead and hold the vote, people vote him down. They're just stupid. I mean, they just look so foolish. This guy is not. What are they going to do if they vote him down? And Trump will put somebody more conservative up, and sooner or later they're going to have to approve. In the Senate, even if the Democrats take the House, that has nothing to do with this. This is a Senate thing confirming the nomination, right?
Yes.
So he's got 2 more years to get somebody even more conservative and throw him in there. Or
well,
one of these women.
If the Democrats take the House in November, it's going to be an obstructionist Congress. They're going to try and find some reason to impeach him. We know that they're using illegal immigrants to try and steal the House. They're probably doing exactly the same thing for the Senate. It's going to be a wild election in November.
Yeah, I don't think the Democrats have much of a chance of taking the Senate, though, is what they're saying. So, anything's possible. But anyway, Grassley, he can be pretty tough after a while. He was the one that when the guy Spartacus, Cory Booker,
Yes.
Kept saying, and Grassley looked at him. He says, how many times you got to keep saying exactly the same thing 3 or 4 times? That was just what Cory Booker was saying. He was trying to say, he just kept repeating himself. But Grassley says now they're going to hold the vote on Thursday, so that'll be it. Either vote for him or vote against him, and he's probably going to be voted in. Feinstein is trying to look like a fool, which is what she is, because they want to elect a fool because her district is nothing but fools. Okay, I'll let you go, Mike. Bye.
All right, thanks an awful lot here, and I just had a couple of listeners write on. It was Anita Hill when Clarence Thomas was being confirmed, and they were just trying to kick this stuff up, and this feels like more of the same. This woman who's accusing Kavanaugh of assault, this happened back in high school, and it was never reported. It's just too convenient, and she's a snowflake social justice warrior. Okay, getting on back to the war zones here. Apparently, over in Saudi Arabia, who is very good friends with the United States government, they are keeping more than 2,500 anti-regime activists behind bars as part of a crackdown led by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman against Muslim preachers, members of the press, and intellectuals in Saudi Arabia. And the rights group Prisoners of Conscience, which is an independent, non-governmental organization advocating human rights in Saudi Arabia, announced in a post on its Twitter page that at least 2,613 people, among them lawyers, judges, academicians, and scholars, are currently languishing in Saudi jails and detention centers. So, there are good buddies, so we're not going to say anything about what they're doing here. Here's a very interesting article. This came out of Press TV. The Israeli Army's ombudsman, Major General Yitzhak Brick, has harshly criticized Israel's military readiness for wars. And he basically came on out and said Israel's weak army is not ready for war, which is why Israel has the Americans do all their fighting for them. So there's apparently a concern that while Israel's mechanized forces, missiles and so forth, are okay, their actual boots on the ground military aren't that good, which was kind of obvious from the last 2 attempts to go on in and capture Lebanon. Really didn't work that well. Now, there is a poll out that shows the majority of Americans agree that aid to Israel should be limited on the issue of its nuclear weapons. You've got the Arms Export Control Act limitations. You've got the Symington Amendment to the Foreign Appropriations Act. You've got the Glenn Act, all of which say the United States may not send any money to any nation in possession of nuclear weapons technology that refuses to sign the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and refuses IAEA inspections. And that's Israel. They will not sign the NNPT. They will not allow inspections. And yet the U.S. government illegally continues to send them your money. NATO is rattling their sabers again and saying that they might invoke Article 5, which is the Let's Go to War article, if there is a cyber attack by Russia. So now hacking is an act of war. The problem with that, of course, is the hacking attack could come from anywhere. It's a very easy false flag to do. All you need to do is compromise a couple of computers inside Russia, and you could launch a cyber attack that appeared to come from Russia. And we already know they're running up the propaganda about Russia. They're already selling us this idea. We have to hate the Russians. And I don't hate the Russians. I'm a big boy. I can decide for myself who my friends and enemies are. A lot of people are very concerned over the fact that China is about to take over operation of Israel's largest port. Now, China is very good at running ports. And they're basically in charge of Panama, the Panama Canal. They're now in charge of that. And this is something they're very good at. But there is a concern that China running the port at Haifa might be a little bit of an impediment to U.S. naval operations, because the U.S. Sixth Fleet sends a lot of their warships in there for port, to dock, to replenish. So China is, this is a contract that was signed back in 2015. It's a 25-year contract, and a lot of people are saying, no, this was not a good thing, especially with all the growing hostility between the United States and China. Well, let me ask you a little question here. Who's responsible for that hostility? I don't think it's China. Okay. Apparently, over in the White House, there's a bit of a disagreement right now regarding North Korea between SecDef Mattis and Donald Trump. And General Mattis, General Kelly, and the Pentagon top brass simply do not see eye to eye with Donald Trump on a whole host of issues, including the withdrawal of troops from the Korean Peninsula. Now, Trump's position is why South Korea and Japan, who are both wealthy and developed nations, have to mooch off the U.S. military security protection and not bear the burden for their own defense, which is a very valid point. Trump is asking why the American military presence is even needed in East Asia. Now, from the Pentagon's point of view, every time they're garrisoning a country, it means two things: more money to spend, more money to play with, and two, it does sort of encourage the governments of those nations to go along with the U.S. agenda. They're less likely to go their own way if there's a permanent U.S. military presence in their country, as there are now in most of the countries around the world. The head of Samsung is going to visit North Korea this week, along with the heads of other top South Korean corporations. Moon Jae-in and Kim Jong-un are going to meet during the visit. This is the first trip to Pyongyang by a sitting South Korean president since 2007. It's sending a signal. The South Korean companies are looking at North Korea for workers and raw materials. They're moving ahead on reunification. They're not going to actually say anything along that line, but that's clearly the direction it's going. And the U.S. is not going to be happy about that. So, now, last Friday we were talking about this massive military drill that Russia and China held together up in Siberia. And Russia and China have released all kinds of videos showing their cool little toys doing what it is that they do. And it was a massive, massive demonstration. Some 303,000 soldiers in these maneuvers. And there's an article over here from Information Clearinghouse saying that basically it's Trump's reckless hostility is driving Russia and China together. And normally, U.S. foreign policy is to try and drive countries apart to keep them easier to control. It's not working any longer. All right, we're going to take another phone call here from Scott in Dallas. Aloha, Scott. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I was just going to say that caller that was talking about American intelligence media, they probably do some of the best reporting on the internet right now. If you haven't heard of them, man, you ought to be kind of embarrassed about that, because these guys are on fire what they're doing over there. So that's one thing. And I was just wondering, you believe math doesn't lie, right?
Well, math can be made to lie.
Well, how can math be made to lie?
If your initial input data is questionable, it's like they say about computers, the Geiger law, garbage in, garbage out. I mean, look at epicycles. Epicycles is the longest running scientific goof in history, but it was backed up by solid mathematics.
Well, what about like the formula? I mean, formulas for, let's just say, the curvature of the Earth. Do you know what that formula even is? I mean, you know what the rate of fall is, right?
Yeah, I mean, the whole idea of mathematics is to come up with a formula that replicates reality. But just because somebody has a formula doesn't necessarily guarantee it's going to be accurate. And again, look at all the stuff they did with ClimateGate. Anyway, what's your point? What's the point you're trying to get to?
Well, I was just, the formula for the curvature of the Earth, according to mainstream science, is 8 inches per mile squared. So that means the first mile, there's only 8 inches of fall. The second mile, there's 32 inches of fall. So when you go out 50 miles, it should be about 1,600 feet, or basically a 160-story building. So how is it a current naval missile test person that actually teaches to shoot missiles and stuff, they're able to paint a target across the water on the ocean 50 miles when it should be hidden by, a 160-story building, and they're doing it ship to ship? Can you explain that?
Well, I would have to look at the tactical situation there, but there are airborne radar platforms that are networked with the launching platforms. That's what the whole Aegis CEC system was all about, where they have these airborne synthetic aperture radars that are up there and able to see over the horizon from where the naval ships are.
No, we're talking a missile instructor saying that they can sit on a ship and paint another target on another ship 50 miles across the ocean. That's not talking about from airborne, that's ship-to-ship contact.
Well, obviously that officer is misstating the situation because there have been a lot of experiments in over-the-horizon radar. They really have not worked out very well. The last one I'm aware of was HARP, where they were trying to basically bounce a radar signal off the ionosphere and get a clean return, but they couldn't get that to work. Anyway, listen, Scott, thank you for the phone call. We're coming up here on another commercial. I'm going to have to let you go. And when we come on back, there's been a new development in the saga of Malaysian Airlines Flight 17. And you're not going to hear this on the American corporate media. Absolutely not. So stay tuned. We'll be back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Now, we all remember the tragedy of Malaysian Airlines Flight 17 that was flying over Ukraine, and it was shot down. And immediately everybody said, oh, Russia shot it down. It was those evil Russians. Putin got his bear rifle out and he shot that airplane down. And there were a lot of inconsistencies in the story. So they set up a supposed international investigation that was supposed to be impartial, but basically they were laundering the propaganda to keep on saying it was Russia, 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 Russia. There were some stories that came out about how there was a Ukrainian fighter in the air at the time. My theory was that they may have been trying to shoot down Vladimir Putin, whose presidential airliner was in the same part of the sky over Ukraine on his way back from a 6-day tour of South America. And his presidential plane, which is a converted passenger liner, is painted in the same colors as Malaysian Airlines. The livery is very, very similar. And I wondered if maybe somebody was trying to bring him down and they hit the wrong plane. Anyway, the international investigation has been very stingy about releasing any information. They have absolutely rejected any of the information Russia wanted to provide, such as radar data tapes and so forth. We've made up our mind. Don't confuse us with the facts here. we're going to blame Russia, and how dare Russia, try and interfere with that. I mean, this is such a serious crime that even innocence cannot be used as a defense here. So, Russia has identified serial numbers found on the debris of the missile that downed Malaysian Airlines Flight 17. And they show that this missile was manufactured in 1986, and following the paperwork of who it was shipped to, it was owned by Ukraine. The numbers were marked on the engine and the nozzle of the missile. And the Russians keep very, very good records. Okay, getting on back to Kavanaugh. Oh, actually, we have a call waiting on the line. Dustin in New Jersey, aloha. We're going to start with you. I'm going to have to take you through the station identification, but what's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, that was also my theory. But you know what kills our theory with the plane thing is, the Russians know the book, so they have countermeasures on Putin's planes for that. That goes back to, it was a Ukrainian Buk missile system. Up until 1986, I believe, the missile was from Ukraine, due to the serial number. And also, remember, didn't they intercept the Ukrainian, somebody from Ukraine, one of the soldiers, they intercepted a message to to a commander or something, saying, we'll shoot down another Boeing. Did you hear about that one?
No, I didn't hear about that one, but I'm not surprised.
Yeah. Can you hold me over? I got some news about Latakia.
Okay, yeah, we're going to hold you over here. And, you can keep talking. We're not quite at the end of the hour.
Yeah, I heard, Mike, S-400s got activated. It's the first time they were activated with this strike from, they're saying it was Israel using Tomahawks, but supposedly they don't have Tomahawks unless they do. And, of course, it came from the Med, probably from their Dolphin subs. So
I don't know if the Dolphin can launch a Tomahawk. They can launch what's called the Popeye, which is a cruise missile, which can have a nuclear warhead. Anyway, we're going to put you on hold. We're going to take a break for station identification, and we'll be back after these few words. And aloha, welcome back to our show, hour number 2. We're talking with Dustin in New Jersey. And so they're saying the attack on Latakia came from Israel rather than U.S. ships.
Yeah, because now there's a Pentagon spokesman claiming that it's not the United States. I mean, unless it's Britain or France, or maybe it's, hey, do you think the CIA has any, naval assets that nobody knows about? Because they do have lots of other things that we do know about, So, it could be a rogue. It's 28 missiles.
That's a lot of missiles. Remember I said there was that wild card, the Arsenal ship that nobody was talking about anymore. But, you can launch a Tomahawk from an aircraft. Doesn't have to be a ship at sea.
So but how many Tomahawks? 28? That'd be quite a, that's quite a fleet of planes doing that. Unless it's a submarine maybe, or a,
yeah, I would tend to think that it's probably one of the warships. But if the U.S. is denying that it's them, then this is kind of weird. The missiles did come in from the ocean, from the Mediterranean, so it's somebody's naval asset. And you're right; it could be France, it could be Britain. Because the U.S. sells those Tomahawks all over the world. And yes, it could also be Israel using aircraft.
You hear, Mike, Pentagon spokesman Navy Commander Sean Robertson tells VOA on Syria claims of engaging missile targets over Latakia. I can unequivocally say this is not us. But
okay.
They did say Assad gassed his own people, though. So
yeah, I'm not ready to just take this guy's word at it. But on the other hand, if the U.S. Did do it, why not take credit for it?
Hey, Mike, it hit supposedly a technical institute. Now, didn't they hit a cancer institute in the second strike, remember?
Yeah, that was That was when they did, the second strike. They blew up a cancer research center, which apparently had come up with some really effective cancer medications, which may have posed a threat to America's pharmaceutical industry. That may explain why it was targeted.
I just still find it amazing how, in all the rubble and smoke, there ain't nobody keeling over. What a fraud that was. What a fraud. Oh, my. Anybody with a brain cell, if you destroy anything chemical weapons, it would linger in the air. People wouldn't be climbing on the rubble. I mean, if anybody knows anything about chlorine gas or anything, you'll be choking and turning purple and blue. You wouldn't be climbing on the rubble for... it's ludicrous, Mike. I mean, it's just, unfortunately, there's a percentage of people out there who are stupid. And it's just a shame that people can't have any critical thinking skills to just figure something out that easy. But, yeah, this ain't over yet. And I keep thinking they already pushed the button for this chemical attack because they said it. So it's still coming, I think.
Okay.
That's all I got to say, Mike.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. And the phone lines are now open now. So let's look at this Kavanaugh situation here. Basically, they're pushing for this accuser to testify before Senate, and the leftist media is out there saying this is going to derail Kavanaugh. This is it. We're going to get him with this one, and they're relying, of course, on this California professor Christine Ford, who has come forward to say that she was the victim of an assault by Kavanaugh back in high school. And she doesn't exactly remember where it happened, except that everybody was drunk. Doesn't remember who the host of the party was. Doesn't remember where the house was. And when she told this story to her therapist in 2012, there were no names, and she described a completely different situation involving 4 young men. Now, there's another story that's coming on out here. I mean, this is ridiculous. I know it happened. I know he did it. I can't tell you where, when, or any of the other facts here. But there's a story coming out of 12160 saying that back when Mitt Romney was running against Obama, this same Christine Ford had a fake harassment story ready back then. So we're going to put this up on whatreallyhappened.com on the next commercial break. So apparently this girl has a history of just making this stuff up for political reasons. So we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And skipping on down here. So anyway, this Christine Ford, who's accusing Kavanaugh of all this, she's an ultra-liberal California psych professor. She's an open borders activist. They don't come more left-wing than that. And as I mentioned earlier in the program, she's got an axe to grind because Brett Kavanaugh's mother was the judge in a foreclosure case against Christine Ford's parents back in 1996. So this is her gotcha. This is her revenge. Clearly she has a motive to make this stuff up. And let's be honest, there's absolutely no proof any of this happened. It's just her word against Brett Kavanaugh's word. And given all the phony accusations of rape that we have seen going all the way back to the 1990s rise of militant feminism, I'm not willing to take this lady's word at face value. Not without something to back it up. Why didn't she report it at the time it happened? That's my first question. Now, I'm not a big fan of Brett Kavanaugh. Again, because of his links to the Vince Foster case here. But rules are rules and fair is fair, and I am sick to death of the dirty dealing that we are seeing coming out of the Democratic Party. It makes me absolutely sick. Okay. Now, interestingly enough, Christine Ford has an attorney, obviously, Deborah Katz, who's now making the rounds on morning television, saying that, oh, yes, she should be taken seriously. You should always take the word of a woman seriously. Interesting, though, is that Katz has a history of downplaying and dismissing accusations made by women against Democratic politicians, including former President Bill Clinton and former Minnesota Senator Al Franken. So again, there's a bias there. Meanwhile, it's now come on out that Christine Ford spent this last weekend deleting all of her social media accounts because they gave her away as being this hard left activist here. Okay. Kavanaugh is going to speak with the Judiciary Committee staffers about the allegations. It's a nothing burger. I'm sorry. There's no there. The story she's telling today does not match the story she told her therapist in 2012. She can't remember who was there. She can't remember where it took place, who the host of the party was. She's admitting that she was intoxicated. There's no case to be made here. This is just another smear job to try and derail Kavanaugh, like that Senator Whitehouse with his insinuation of a gambling problem, which turned out not to exist. That other caller was right. This is a chance for the American public to learn just how dirty politics are in this country. Okay, now, former FBI attorney Lisa Page is now admitting the FBI could not prove collusion between Trump and Russia before the appointment of Mueller as special counsel. Now, this is bombshell testimony because you're not supposed to appoint a special counsel until the Department of Justice, for whom the FBI is their investigative branch, has conducted a normal investigation and found that a crime occurred. Then you get the special counsel. Rod Rosenstein simply approved Mueller, or appointed Mueller as the special counsel, and sicked him on Trump and everybody in his circle. So basically, Lisa Page, in a closed-door joint session of the House Judiciary and Oversight Committees, told investigators they could not make the charge. And they're saying as late as May of 2017, they couldn't find anything. There's nothing there. This is dirty politics from top to bottom. Now, the FISA documents are confirming that the FBI and Department of Justice intentionally misled the FISA court by withholding the fact that Clinton and the Democratic National Committee were behind the Christopher Steele dossier used in the FISA applications. They basically lied. They came up with this dossier, which is a fraud. They go to the FISA court saying, we've got this dossier. Look at all the salacious details in there. Look at what Donald Trump did with the hookers in Moscow. And the FISA court didn't even really hold a hearing. They just rubber stamped the application to make it legal to spy on Trump's associates, Carter Page. And the FBI did this even already aware that the Russians had basically dismissed tried to recruit Carter Page as an asset. They were really not very impressed with him. All right, let's take a phone call here from Fred in Michigan. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey there, Mike. I want to thank Mo in Florida, I believe that is, and Scott in the Lone Star State. They tweaked my memory regarding American Intelligence Media, AIM for Truth.org. I discovered them, I think, this past April. And I did call that in to RBN, to several broadcasts, regarding the fact there is this, one of the first ones I saw is Americans SS, the Senior Executive Service. And they're on YouTube. American Intelligence Media is the name of their YouTube channel. They got a whole array of presentations. And so I saw this, DOJ, there's 500 plus bar esquire attorneys, all of them members of SES. And SES is essentially their own bureaucracy, the way it was established by Jimmy Carter in the, the Civil Rights Reform Act of 1978. I don't have it all down, but let me tell you, this guy, Andrew McKibben, there's like three guys, one of whom is a former NSA guy who is also a former Jesuit. His name is Douglas Gabriel. And they have sort of their own little roundtable discussion. And they give precisely accurate connected details regarding the names of the entities, the agencies, like Circle from UK. Circle is a big-time covert transnational operation, which is connected with Israel, and Israel, the Telpiat program, Unit 8200. Okay, this blew my mind. You see, it isn't just Brendan O'Connell. He has a prominent presence, and he's done some very stellar due diligence in collating all of this evidentiary proof. And unlike me and probably everyone else in the audience, we have never taken it to the streets. We have never confronted the Israeli invader parasites taking over our country. But this guy did over in Perth, Australia, and it nearly cost him his life. But what he does is he proves, even with, and he tells the audience, this is O'Connell, he tells the audience to check out the Times of Israel. All you got to do is search Israel, steals, hijacks, U.S. high-tech military technology, and then sells it to China. Because remember, Alex Jones, the Chi-Coms have taken over, the Chi-Coms, right?
Yep.
Well, the Chi-Coms are the best customer of Benjamin Bibi Bowel Movement Netanyahu, I say, and that whole cadre. And that whole cadre, by the way, is intimately connected all over the place. So, what we got to do here, Michael, we got to somehow, we have to oppose this. We have to confront it. And other than taking it to the streets, I guess what we have to do is start organizing town hall meetings in our locale with this intel data. And by the way, you and everyone in the audience, remember Michael Herzog? Herzog is the guy who interviewed O'Connell, I think about 10 times when he was with RBN. And then he formed the American Awakening.org. So on the 21st of July, Brendan O'Connell does this Connect the Dots presentation at the American Awakening.org. Well, let me tell you, it is absolutely awesome, man. Okay? And he shows with the Times of Israel, military citations, military journals, etc., how Israel, there's a group called the Binational Industrial Research and Development Foundation. And all of these were set up by Henry Kissinger and Associates back in the 70s. It goes all that far back, man.
Okay, Fred, is this coming to a point? Because it just seems like you're kind of rambling around here. What is the point you're trying to make?
The point I'm trying to make is what we gotta talk it up. We gotta spread it to our friends and neighbors wherever we can. Even going to, if you have public access in your locale, Mike, they shut it down here in Flintstone Leadwater. They shut it down. But if you have it, go to it and cite these sources. Cite the sources with student groups on college campuses. People that are in metroplexes like Dallas, Fort Worth, etc. Man, they're loaded with opportunities, man. We got to get the word out. We got to organize. We got to stop the funding. Look at what's her name? What's her name? That woman. Oh, geez. IfAmericans.Knew.org. What's her name, Michael? Ellison Ware. Ware.
Yeah, Ellison Ware.
IfAmericans.Knew.org. She did a UCal Berkeley presentation a year ago about her blind faith support of Israel. She was a proactive Israeli. She was one of those Peace Corps volunteers, one of the originals. Then she got over there and witnessed everything firsthand. And people got to check her out on YouTube. And maybe you can
we link to her on a regular basis. Anyway, listen, Fred, I got to let you go. Man. We got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be back in 3 minutes after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And once again, I have to hold my hand on out and beg piteously for your spare change so that Republic Broadcasting can keep broadcasting for another day. And if you don't donate, we're going to have to start selling off our control room technicians for medical experiments. So the postal address where you can send a check, money order, or if you prefer anonymity cash is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. And the phone number where you can make a debit or credit card donation or pledge to be a recurring subscriber is 800-724-2719, extension 1 during business hours, extension 3 at all other times. The network thanks you. Okay, a little more information about the Kavanaugh situation. Deborah Katz, who's the attorney for Christine Ford, who's accusing Brett Kavanaugh of sexual assault, has now come out with an announcement that it's not her job to corroborate her story. You just accept it at face value. After all, she's a woman. She wouldn't lie about such things. Actually, at the height of the militant feminist movement in the 1990s, rape was the second most falsely reported crime in the entire country. There have been a lot of rape hoaxes. Tawana Brawley is a good one that springs to mind. So, no, absent any proof, no, I'm not accepting this story of a sexual assault. Between the discrepancy between the current version and the version she told her therapist, the fact that she can't seem to remember any of the salient facts about any of it, it's just another Democratic smear job. Over this last weekend, Maxine Waters again launched her verbal assault, if you will, on President Trump, screaming that he was a disgusting person and just frothing at the mouth. And apparently, having done so for so long, has caught the attention of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, which has now awarded her with a National Leadership Award. This happened last Friday. And during her acceptance speech, Maxine Waters again launched into President Trump, prompting applause from the audience of media leaders, which tells us that, yes, the media is liberally biased here. Barack Obama is back out on the campaign trail. He's supposed to be campaigning for the Democratic candidates for November, but he just can't stop talking about himself, even though he's supposed to be talking about these other people. And apparently during the Cleveland rally for Rich Cordray and Betty Sutton, Obama repeatedly talked about himself, despite the candidates sitting behind him. And apparently at one point when he was trying to attack President Trump, he began to stutter, which got a lot of people wondering what the heck is going on with him. Over at Amazon, the CEO, Jeff Bezos, right now is the world's wealthiest man. He's also, until very recently, widely considered the least generous billionaire. The Bezos Family Fund, the only major philanthropic endeavor bearing his name, was established with money earned by his parents, who were early private investors in Amazon. But for whatever reason, maybe Bernie Sanders Stop Bezos Act, or all the negative PR that Amazon has gotten in the media lately, Bezos is launching a $2 billion charity, which that would be good, but I think that $2 billion really would be better spent providing higher wages and salaries for his workers here. And apparently there is yet another scandal where Amazon staff are accepting bribes of more than $2,000 from online merchants to delete bad reviews, to restore banned accounts, and reveal customers' private buying trends. And apparently sellers, predominantly based in China, are buying the data in a bid to gain an edge over competitors and boost sales in the online stores. Now, Amazon says they're investigating the allegations. But, yeah, if they're taking bribes to erase bad reviews, that's a serious situation. And I wonder where else that's going on in the online shopping community. Because there have been more than a few places where I've seen bad reviews get erased. And more than a few positive reviews, which seem suspiciously, how shall I put this delicately, professional in their writing. I know over at RottenTomatoes.com, very often you'll go on in and you'll look at the reviews for a movie that's really not all that good, and there'll be all these positive, glowing reviews, and you can spot them as being fakes because they're written as if the author really dreams of being a film critic in the corporate media. Okay, so we're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And there are still unconfirmed reports of missiles targeting Hama, Homs, Latakia, and Tartus governorates in Syria. Now, Latakia and Tartus are where the majority of the Russian forces are located. So this is getting really intense. The question is, when and if will Russia actually retaliate against whoever is sending these missiles in there? So far, we're not getting any comment from the Russian military. And as that caller came on in and said, the Pentagon is denying that they have anything to do with this. So we'll see what's going to happen on that. Let's see what else is coming on in. Okay, let's talk about the economic news for a while. We are seeing, again, more stories about how the Asian and European nations are seeking to minimize their dependence on the U.S. dollar. And basically, a lot of it has to do with the fact that trust in the U.S. dollar is eroding, has been for quite some time because of the out-of-control debt in this country, and the fact that the U.S. more and more is using that dollar as a weapon to coerce other countries to bend to its will. So more and more countries are looking at ways to minimize their dependence on the dollar. They suddenly realize, first of all, it's possible. And then from that, it should be done. See, ever since Bretton Woods was signed, the world sort of got into this attitude, we have to use the dollar. That's the global currency. But that really began to erode in the 1970s when Richard Nixon closed the gold window, ended gold convertibility. Technically, that was the end of Bretton Woods, and the U.S. tried to maintain the dollar's global hegemonic domination by linking it to the buying and selling of oil and other natural resources around the world. But other countries are saying, hey, this is not really working out for us. Down in Venezuela, they tried to raise their minimum wage by 3,000% to try and restart the economy, and inevitably 40% of their retail outlets have now gone out of business. So it's not going well down there at all. And I fear that what we're seeing in Venezuela will be coming to the United States very, very soon here. Over in Switzerland, their financial supervisor, FINMA, is lambasting Credit Suisse over FIFA money laundering, as well as Brazil's and Venezuela's state oil companies. And so once again, we're finding out Jesse James was right. The real outlaws are the banks. And we keep seeing all these stories about how they're engaged in fraud, financial rigging, and nobody ever goes to jail. There'll be a wrist slap fine on the bank that amounts to just a tiny fraction of their profits. They'll take the fines off of their taxes, which means ordinary people wind up paying for it because the tax burden shifted onto them here. Okay, apparently Trump is likely to announce another $200 billion of tariffs on Chinese imports. Could even happen today, but it's definitely going to happen this week. This according to Reuters. And the tariff level will be about 10%. And that was below the 25% the administration said it was considering for this possible round of tariffs. So when you go to your local big box store to buy products, get ready for them to be much more expensive, because ultimately you pay the tariff. And it's under the form of tax. The government gets that money that you are paying when you check out of the big box store. So anyway, apparently there's this upscale fashion label, Henri Bendel. It's been in business 123 years, and it's shutting down all of its 23 stores in the United States, including the flagship location on New York's 5th Avenue. Now, it's going to remain open through the holiday shopping season. Then it will shut down at the start of next year due to sluggish sales. And we're going to see a lot of retailers that are going to be doing that, because ordinary Americans are not able to earn decent wages and salaries in order to go into stores. And the fact that high-end stores like this are now in trouble is telling us that the collapse of the U.S. economy is reaching higher and higher levels within our society. Over in Germany, Merkel is apparently deciding to fire the intelligence chief after remarks made about the Chemnitz unrest. Now, the Chemnitz riots were started when there was a German citizen that was murdered by one of the refugees. And apparently in his comment, the intelligence chief came on out saying that he thought the video showing the alleged attacks by right-wing activists on migrants was a fake. That there was this campaign to try and get the German people to feel sorry for the migrants, the refugees. And he came on out and he said he thinks the video was a fake, it was staged, and he's been fired for that now. Sadiq Khan is now out there once again saying that Brexit should be delayed because they need time for a new referendum. Because we're just going to keep on having referendums until we get the result that we want. Now, they've had a referendum. The British voter has spoken, and the government is supposed to go with the will of the people. That's how democracies work. But Sadiq Khan wants a new referendum, and they're going to try twice as hard to rig it, because there was a lot of fraud detected in the last referendum, all on the side of Remain. So they're still figuring out a way that they can keep Britain shackled to the European Union, under the control of Brussels, and enslaved to the European Central Bank. Okay, we're going to take a phone call now from Mark in North Carolina. Aloha, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yo, Mike. Frank, I'm wondering, when you talk about those missiles, I don't think it'd be coming from the U.S. because I think the Russians pretty well understand and know where the U.S. ships are right now who would be capable of firing those missiles. I'm thinking Israel, but I don't know is Israel that crazy that they would actually start firing at Russian bases? Russia could flatten Israel probably in about, 2 hours. So do you really think they're that crazy that they would do something like that?
Yeah, I think they might be that crazy, and I think they're trying to provoke Russia. I mean, earlier in the show, we were reporting on how Putin and Erdogan had basically said they were not going to go into Idlib. They were going to create this demilitarized buffer zone and just let things lie. But we know that the United States wants to get in there and mix things up. They still want to go after Assad, and they're looking for a reason. And I'm still expecting there to be a false flag chemical weapon attack. But this definitely looks like an attempt to either provoke Russia. I mean, they could even be thinking that they could convince Russia to leave with all of these attacks. I don't think that's going to happen. Putin is facing a lot of pressure from his own people back home to basically take a stand in Russia's, Russia's interests in the region.
I know. I mean, this is crazy. I mean, do they have any idea whether it is Israel or not? Have they said anything to that?
No, they haven't. I'm looking at another story of that right now. Basically saying Syrian social media activists have taken to Facebook to accuse either the U.S. coalition or Israel for the attack. It is still not clear where it came from. And again, from the number of missiles involved, I would have to say it's probably the U.S. coalition. And again, there is that one, what's called an arsenal ship. It's an SSGN submarine. It's a converted Ohio-class ballistic missile submarine. The Trident missiles were taken out because of nuclear arms treaty limits. But instead of scrapping the ships, they put a 7-cell launcher in each one of those Trident missile tubes that can launch Tomahawks. And so we're talking a warship that's 24, actually 2 of the missile tubes are used for other things, so it's 22 missile tubes times 7 Tomahawks each. That's a lot of firepower. And the Ohio class are notorious for being very, very difficult to find.
Hey, as an ex-member of the military, I'm going to tell you this. Any sailor, soldier, sailor, Marine, airman, or anybody else going along with this and firing these missiles is a traitor to the United States as well as a war criminal. This is absolutely out of anything that American soldiers are supposed to do. American soldiers are supposed to, and sailors are supposed to defend the Constitution of this country. They're supposed to defend the country. They're not supposed to declare war, fight wars against people that need them no harm. And they're certainly not supposed to be sneaking up on people, firing missiles at them like they're playing games. I mean, this is disgusting. I wouldn't, I think if this is really happening, I think Russia will probably have to sink a couple of ships in order to stop it. Now, what's going to happen after that is anybody's guess. That's how dangerous this is, and that's what kind of madmen we've got governing us. I think Trump is totally out of the loop. I don't think the man knows what he's doing. Either doesn't know what he's doing, or he's so afraid of these deep staters that seem to control him, like the Bolton people like that. You're not going to get anybody in there. But if that's the case. But Trump is out of his league. He doesn't know what he's doing, and I'm afraid it really looks things are starting to really look grim. Nobody's even talking about this that's going on in Syria.
Yeah, it's not on the corporate media. I mean, they're still going on about Kavanaugh, and apparently Trump has gone ahead and declassified those FISA documents. So it'll be interesting to see what was underneath all the black marks. But yeah, the corporate media is not talking about any of this stuff going on over Syria, and just how close we are to a direct confrontation with Russia. And whoever was shooting at Russia, I'm sure Russia's going to figure out who it was, and there may be a response, and that may be the initiating event the U.S. seizes on to say we're going to go to full-on war in Syria.
Mike, when you and me were coming up during the Cold War, if you had a situation like this going on right now, the news, this is all the news that we'd be covering, and normal people would be, whatting in their crapping in their pants if this was happening back then, because people were at least tuned into what's going on. I don't know whether it's the cell phones that people are just, so hypnotized they don't know what's going on. Maybe the GMO food. I just don't understand it. We're not going to be able to beat Russia if it comes to a ground war. If it comes to a conventional war, they will kick our butts. Now
Yes.
the question is, at that point, what happens? How are you going to defeat Russia? I go to YouTube and other things sometimes to watch some of the maneuvers of the Russian military. I mean, they are awesome. They are awesome. Okay, they are motivated. They're in shape. They're ready. Then I notice pictures of our troops. You're starting to see more and more fatties in there.
Yeah.
Okay, because this the pick from the bottom of the barrel now, and they and they don't, and I don't think these troops are motivated at all. And on top of that, Russia's in an area where it feels it's defending itself. It's defending, even in Syria.
Yes.
Syria is only how many hours away from actual the mainland of Russia. So these troops got to know they're not defending anything. They got to know they're being used and misused by the globalists. They're not defending the United States. I've posted that on Facebook already. You're not defending if you're over there shooting at the Syrians and threatening the Syrians or whatever else. You're not defending this country. You're hurting this country. The Syrian troops, they're defending their country. They have every right to defend their country. We're there uninvited, like an invading army, and like I said, it just seems to be getting worse and worse. But what bothers me really is people of this country that we don't understand what's going on. There are some people on the internet that follow this that understand. People like you and me understand. But even a lot of people that do come out from the Cold War don't seem to understand it. They come from the Cold War generations and all. They don't seem to understand it. I don't know what it is. Maybe it is the food. I mean, I eat healthy food. I eat wholesome food. I exercise all the time. I try to keep my head clear and all that. And I live in a country, and I try to do the best I can. So maybe that's it. Maybe I still got my thinking process is going. But
well,
so
I
many
think the
people
difference
today,
is you're willing to look at the world as it really is, and there are still, it's a dwindling minority, but there are a lot of Americans who just want to pretend that none of this stuff is happening because it is so scary to contemplate that we're on the verge of a new world war, and this one is definitely going to involve nuclear weapons. It won't just be two little nuclear firecrackers over Hiroshima and Nagasaki. We're talking about multi-megaton city busters that are going to be flinging all over the planet.
that would mean by the time, let's say, the time this day is over, let's say this war started at noon, by the time people are ready to go to bed, if there's a bed to even go to, we would lose more, there'd be more people killed, not many more, than all of World War II and World War I together combined.
Absolutely, no question about it. Anyway, Mark, I got to let you go. We got to take another break for commercials, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And this is kind of an interesting story. It's actually a fun story, which is rare in this day and age. Down in Bogota, Colombia, the mayor, Antonis Marcos, fired a large portion of the city's police force in the traffic division and is replacing them with mimes. And apparently decided that having mimes out there in their garish costumes directing traffic and applauding good drivers and making fun of bad ones was going to improve traffic safety better than writing tickets. And it turned out it worked. The city saw a 50% drop in traffic fatalities, less congestion, and an overall better culture of driving. Boy, could we use that here in Hawaii. The state of inadequate roads and bad drivers. And it wasn't always like that. When Claire and I moved here 20 years ago, everybody drove slowly, they were polite and everything, and now everybody's suffering road rage. Just when you think the leftists can't get more absurd, they get more absurd. Apparently, Casey Wells, a teaching professor at the University of Oklahoma, says it's time to get rid of all gifted math classes because they're racist. They're inherently racist. They promote academic apartheid. And according to this professor, placing more skilled and talented students into higher level math classes based on their abilities is a form of, quote, capitalist exploitation and subtler colonialism. A designation that's supposed to sound really smart, but it's nothing more than a rhetorical hodgepodge of the usual anti-white, left-wing gobbledygook. Now, I don't know about you, but if I'm riding in an airplane, I'm hoping the pilot is the top of their class. Same thing when I go to the doctor's office. We need to reward our excellent students. We need to promote them. We need to move them forward because they're going to be the foundation of our ability to innovate in the future. And this idea of saying no more accelerated classes because it's racist. Talk about cutting our own throats for the future. And you know, I went through this years and years ago when I still lived in Southern California, and I actually taught a year of remedial math at the high school level. And during the lunch period, I scouted some students who were clearly bored with the math curriculum, and we just sort of had this little get-together on lunch to learn how to use a slide rule, which if you're really young, you probably don't even remember what that is. And boy, did I get slammed for that by the administration. Because, you know, the complaints were coming in from the parents of students who just didn't want to learn math anyway, saying, well, you've got to do this for my kid. My kid needs to be in that accelerated class. And so it wound up with the workshop being shut down and these really bright students being denied an opportunity to move ahead. And it was a very, very frustrating thing for me, which is why after the year was over, I went and I decided I was going to do something else. Alrighty, we're coming up here on another station identification. And I'm not hearing the music yet, and I don't know why. There it is. We'll be right back after station identification and these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Getting on back to liberalism, snowflakes. As you know, Apple just had their big event, their debut of this year's iPhone XS, XR, XS Plus, just in time for the holiday shopping season. And feminists are already complaining that Apple is making the phones, they're too big for women to hold. You know, how dare you do that? You're being unfair to women because these phones are so big. Now, for the record, Claire does not have a problem with her iPhone, which is one of the largest ones you can get. But I mean, that's silly. And it's just another example of the fact that liberals aren't feeling victimized or offended. They're looking for things to complain about. They're looking for things to whine about. Because that's become the liberals' complete culture, whining and crying and being offended and saying, you know, you've got to stop offending me. Okay, now there is an app that is put out by Robinhood. It's an investing app, and apparently it has been caught basically harvesting the user's data in terms of their stock trades and selling them to the high-frequency trading firms on Wall Street. So these high-frequency trading firms know what ordinary people are buying and selling from this data, and they can adjust their trading accordingly so that they make money and you lose it. Over at Twitter, they're blocking the accounts of real Iranians. This is a complaint coming from Iran's Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif, saying that Twitter has blocked the accounts of real Iranians, but is ignoring the regime change propaganda spewing out of Washington, D.C. Yeah, we've seen that already. They did that to Syria. YouTube has shut down all the Syrian state TV channels, but all of the Let's Get Syria videos, they're still out there. It's all propaganda. All right, we're going to take a phone call now. Kevin from West Virginia. Aloha, Kevin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mr. Mike. I hope you're having a great and wonderful day.
So far, so good.
You were talking about cool. You were talking about the society and with liberalism, and the one thing that I can't get off of my head is I'm 34 years old, and I grew up in the you get an award, a participation award, if you participate, and that always bothered me because I always thought there's winners and there's losers. I mean, I understand that there's other people that participate, but what happened to society of winners and losers? You don't get an award if you lose. Come back, try again, try another day. Why don't we have that attitude anymore?
Because accomplishment is now politically incorrect. We're seeing exactly the same thing with that ridiculous idea that math classes for the gifted should be banned. And the idea is we're all supposed to be mandated to be equal, equally dumb, equally weak. And you're right. When I was a kid, the idea is you wanted to be a winner. You wanted to be the best at something, whether it was math or athletics or science. It's kind of where I went. I was into the sciences as a kid, and our teachers encouraged us to try and do things that were outside the curriculum. And there were prizes, if you did that. I won a science fair when I was in high school, and that was a very proud moment in my life. The kids who didn't win, I'm sure they felt bad. The kids who didn't even try to enter the science fair, that was their problem. But the idea is, we wanted to be a nation of achievers, and that is being taken away by the liberals.
I mean, you're absolutely right, and it blows my mind because, I go to college up at Hagerstown Community College in Maryland, and, at the beginning of a psychology class, we're talking about the Kavanaugh hearings, and I'm thinking to myself, what exactly does this have to do with psychology? Like, I'm confused. I mean, but this is any time that the colleges can bash right-wing agenda or Trump, they take the opportunity and do it. I just can't sit in there anymore.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Yeah, it is. It is. Our education system is not about education. It's about indoctrination. And they're starting at lower and lower levels in the education system. That's a big part of what Common Core was all about, to basically deny kids learning skills that would allow them to think for themselves, and basically just pump in a lot of propaganda. Like I said, I got to look at some of that Common Core curriculum. We used to have a neighbor who was working on the implementation of it here in Hawaii, and some of the stuff I saw, they completely rewrote the Bill of Rights to change its meaning. They literally, in common court, teaches that the Second Amendment gives you the right to keep and bear arms if you are in a government-controlled militia. It literally says that. So it's all about brainwashing our kids.
Yes, it does. I actually have a copy of the new Second Amendment thing that my political science teacher was handing out on Constitution Day, and I had brought it to him, and I'm like, what's up with this? This is totally different than what I remember. Is this Mandela effect, or is this completely insane? I mean, and he told me that's what it always said, and I'm like, no, sir, it did not always say that.
Yep. And again, it's indoctrination, and yeah, they're trying to basically rewrite history in order to basically take away from us our heritage of being a republic with a democratically elected government. We're being led down the road to dictatorship.
Yeah, left foot, right foot. I call it the totalitarian tiptoe. You know, left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot. I mean, and that's where we're at. I mean, and I'm a little afraid for my country, and I'm a little afraid for everybody else, you know. I mean, it seems like nobody cares. They're too distracted by everything, or they just don't want to know. And I don't know what to do.
We're just going to have to go through it. And hopefully on the far side of the next world war, people around the world are going to wake up and say, look, we really need to have a better way to run this world. Because these politicians, they keep mucking it up. They keep getting us into endless wars. You know, I mean, we've now been at war. The United States government has been at war now for 17 years, longer than World War I and World War II put together. And there are 7 official wars. And if Bernie Sanders is to be believed, the U.S. has militarily intervened in some 76 countries around the world. That sounds like a world war to me. But my concern is that it's going to keep on escalating, like with all these missiles flying over Syria right now. And it's going to wind up with somebody pushing the button and taking this whole thing nuclear. And that's going to be a bad day for anybody not wearing 2 million sunblock.
You got that right, sir. Well, you have a great and wonderful day, and give Miss Claire the best. That's all I have for you.
All right. Well, thank you very much, and I will forward your wishes to the lovely Lady Claire. And getting on back here, a little bit of a breaking story. Apparently, the Senate Judiciary Committee had a meeting with Brett Kavanaugh in which he denied even being at the party that this Christine Ford claims he assaulted her. And apparently that was good enough for the Judiciary Committee. They have scheduled the vote for his confirmation for Thursday. So that is moving ahead. All righty, getting on back to computers and computer-type issues here. Apparently, poor Elon Musk, he seems to be self-destructing with that stunt with the marijuana-laced cigar. But there's been another embarrassment regarding the Model 3 Tesla, because a hacker was apparently able to steal a Tesla 3 from the Mall of America using only his smartphone. Now, that is going to come as a blow for confidence in Tesla's security system. And apparently this car was stolen after Tesla customer service over the phone apparently handed the thief the keys by allowing him to add the car by VIN number to his Tesla account. And then the thief made it 1,000 miles before police caught up with him and arrested him. Sometimes I miss the good old-fashioned days of just a regular key that goes into the slot and you turn it. Those things really were very secure if it was a solid lock. And when I was a kid, when I was a magician, I learned a lot about locks. And it's kind of amazing. A lot of what you'll see in the stores are so cheaply built, and you wonder why anybody even bothers with those. Especially with the use of plastic, which you just know. A screwdriver and a hammer, the lock is gone. But I used to have a nice little collection of high-end locks, and they were very, very good. Okay, a lot of people have been talking and emailing me about the solar observatory out in New Mexico on Sacramento Peak. And it was closed mysteriously last week by the FBI. And of course, the rumors started flying. Oh, they'd seen a UFO, the space aliens, blah, 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 blah. The usual kookification stuff going on. The observatory is now reopened. And basically, there was some kind of a criminal activity going on at the facility. And there was a concern that one of the suspects in the investigation potentially posed a threat to the safety of the staff and residents of the observatory, and that's why they vacated the facility. And so that's all there was to it. No space aliens, no flying saucers, things like that. Now, a lot of people are on the antidepressant Prozac. It's a commonly prescribed antidepressant. It's called fluoxetine. The brand name is Prozac. And it now turns out, according to new research, it may be driving the antibiotic resistance crisis. And they discovered in this research study that E. coli, which can cause food poisoning, when it's exposed to Prozac, the bacteria undergoes genetic mutations that stop it from responding to common antibiotics. And the study found that E. coli can lead to life-threatening kidney damage in up to 10% of the cases. So that's something I'm pretty sure they weren't testing for when they took Prozac to market. There's been a whistleblower nurse come forward. This is a story coming out of vaccineimpact.com. Basically, how hospitals are vaccinating patients literally by force without their knowledge. I mean, if you're in the hospital, you're in the bed, they come in, there's a whole bunch of needles. You really don't know what's in there. And these patients aren't finding out that they've been vaccinated until they get the itemized medical bill and go through that and say, oh, vaccinated for this, vaccinated for that, vaccinated for whatever, which would be okay if it weren't for all of the continuing concerns over whether vaccines are safe or not, if they're even effective. Now, interestingly enough, over in Japan, they banned mandatory vaccinations. This idea that when you're a kid, when you're growing up, you've got to have all these shots. Japan said, no, we're not going to do that. And as a result, Japan has the world's lowest child death rate and the highest life expectancy. So you think about that. Japan has the lowest infant mortality rate on the planet after banning all these mandatory vaccinations like we have in the United States. Now, Japan's anti-vaccination policies are obviously criticized by the vaccine pushers in the U.S., who claim that vaccinating the public promotes health. Well, obviously, from the results that Japan got, that may not be true. Getting on back over to Monsanto land, apparently there's a company up in Oregon, Bob's Red Mill, and they put out what are supposed to be healthy products. And it turned out that their oat products had been sprayed with glyphosate, was contaminated by the weed killer, and it was not disclosed on the label. The labels had phrases like gluten-free, wheat-free, purity tested, all designed to make consumers believe that they were healthy, but they were contaminated with glyphosate, which is a probable human carcinogen. And as a result, Bob's Red Mill is now looking at a class action lawsuit by everybody who has ever bought any of their products. I think that company is not going to be around for very, very much longer. Remember when BPA was around? It was this coating that was put on the inside of cans, water water bottles, things like that. And it was eventually banned because it caused a lot of health issues. And there are a lot of substitutes for BPA were created shortly then after and entered the market. Now there's a new study by Patricia Hunt over at Washington State University and Tegan Horan, also the Washington State University, showing that these new follow-on substitutes for BPA may in fact be causing the same health issues as the original. So, again, where was the FDA on all of this stuff? They just sort of look the other way. Okay. Over at the Free Thought Project, and everybody's ramping up on this. This is a horrible situation. Apparently, a grand jury investigating a child sex ring in the Catholic Church discovered police were actually involved. They were complicit in trying to keep this covered up. This is part of what's coming out of Pennsylvania, and that huge expose out there. So the State Attorney General, Josh Shapiro, is providing insight into how priests were allowed to go on for decades preying on children, and he singled out two groups responsible for covering up the crimes of the church. Now, one of the groups was obviously the Catholic Church hierarchy, the archbishops and cardinals, who would react to these allegations of child rape by simply transferring the priest to a new church or simply not acting at all. The other group Shapiro named was law enforcement itself, who he said acted in tandem with the abusive priests to keep their horrific habits from ever reaching the public eye. So much for to protect and to serve. Okay, now, a lot of ordinary rank-and-file Catholics have reached their breaking point, and they're starting to put pressure on church leaders to try and solve the problem, to prevent the sex abuse. This is happening all across the country, and apparently there's a national campaign, Time's Up, Catholics Demand Truth. And they're saying it's time for the church to come clean on all of this. This is in the wake of that bombshell report out of Pennsylvania that named 300 predator priests and the leaders who covered up their crimes. Now, of course, the Catholic leadership seems to have something else that they want to do. And apparently, in 2015, the New York State Catholic Conference contracted lobbying groups to block a bill called the Child Victims Act, which was aimed at making it easier for victims of child sex crimes to come out against their accusers. The Catholic Church spent over $2 million lobbying against this law. We got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And as you know, that Pennsylvania grand jury was a major shock. It's not ending there. This is blowing up in the U.S., Australia, and Chile. And apparently over in Germany, there was a study conducted by the universities of Gießen, Heidelberg, and Mannheim that found 3,677 cases of child sexual abuse between 1946 and 2014, perpetrated by 1,670 clerics and priests. The victims were predominantly boys, and more than half of them were aged 13 or younger. And it may have even been worse because the study found that a lot of records appeared to have been destroyed or manipulated. So Pope Francis is out there trying to deal with this, and now he's saying it's all the fault of the devil. Pope Francis blamed the devil for the sexual abuse scandal that has shaken the Catholic Church. And the Pope's way of thinking is that it's the efforts to expose the sinful cover-ups and abusive clergymen that are the work of Satan. So if you're ratting out the priest, you're doing Satan's work. Reminds me of the old Flip Wilson routine, the devil made me buy this dress. So that's definitely getting out there. You know, it's all the devil's fault that this is coming to light. No, actually, it's the fault of all the priests who did this stuff. You know, let's get a little honest here. This would not be a scandal if this was not a widespread problem among the clergy. And by the way, it's not confined to the Catholics. It's a big problem with the Catholics, but we see this in other religions as well. So, article out of a YouTube video, rather, calling for Pope Francis to resign. That's going to be historic. 2 popes in a row resigning. So, let's talk about human-caused global warming. And we're already seeing early snow start to hit in the northern hemisphere. It was snowing up in British Columbia. Calgary was hit with unseasonable flurries of snow. And the photos coming on out, it's not a light dusting. It's pretty heavy, lasting snow out there. Fort St. John set a snowfall record a week ago. And apparently over in Saskatoon, they broke a 115-year-old record for cold temperatures. So it's getting cold out there. Northern Minnesota is seeing record-breaking cold temperatures last Thursday. And over in Africa, they had a freak blizzard, which resulted in photos of giraffes and elephants wandering about in the snow. That's not a picture you're normally used to seeing, giraffes and elephants in the snow, but it was there. Now, as the East Coast continues to deal with Tropical Storm Florence, believe it or not, the editorial board of the Washington Post declared that Donald Trump was complicit for Hurricane Florence because of his views on climate change. And even before the storm made landfall, the Post published a column headlined, "Another hurricane is about to batter our coast. Trump is complicit." And I mean, that is absurd. And I'm not the only person to say so. Sean Hannity came on out and said, trying to blame Donald Trump for bad weather is a new low. But you have to look at the Washington Post and say, how low can you go? Because they're down in the basement already, still digging here. Meanwhile, the proponents of the global warming hoax are now out there demanding all media censor all opposing views, claiming that the global warming activists are too right. We shouldn't even be bothered with the debate. We know that we're right. And they'll probably get it, at least on the social media platforms. Now that the social media platforms are openly scrubbing conservative content, yeah, they'll start going after the critics or those who question human-caused global warming. And when you get into this situation of saying, we don't want to debate the issue, the science is settled. No, the science is never settled. And if you're not willing to put your theories to a test in an academic setting, then it's basically signaling that you just made it all up. It was a hoax. It was an absolute hoax. Apparently, scientists have now detected Earth's lowest temperature ever, and it was a minus 144 degrees Fahrenheit. This was over at the East Antarctic Plateau. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And before we take this next phone call here, I've got a little update on the story where Donald Trump has ordered the release of the unredacted FISA paperwork, which we understand is going to be very embarrassing to the FBI. But I'm looking at the statement from the White House press secretary. Trump also has directed the Department of Justice and the FBI to publicly release all text messages relating to the Russia investigation without redaction of James Comey, Andrew McCabe, Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, and Bruce Orr. This is going to get interesting. All right, back to the phones here. We're going to talk with Russell in Texas. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello. Just wanted to talk about tariffs a little bit. I think Trump is correct to put tariffs on China, especially because they're running about almost a $500 billion trade deficit with us, and that means probably in the neighborhood of 10 million manufacturing jobs. NAFTA is how they got into that position because China was able to ship products to Mexico that came across the border without tariffs, and that's what really decimated our manufacturing. And it's a balance because it does cost the taxpayer, the consumer, if you put tariffs on stuff, but the option is to not have any manufacturing.
Well, so, the part that I think is wrong with the tariffs right now is the timing, because we don't have the manufacturing. And the reason we don't have the manufacturing goes all the way back to literally the end of World War II. When we could do no wrong, everybody was flooding to buy our products, and companies were starting up, and they needed managers. And so Harvard Business School came up with this idea of scientific management, a standardized set of procedures and processes that would allow somebody to come into a company and manage its operation without having to grow up with the business. And then they created a degree program to go with it called the Masters in Business Administration. And what that did in turn was create a generation of mid-level managers and later corporate executives who had no emotional connection to the process of manufacturing. And so back when about 20 years ago is when they started saying, well, we'll just ship the manufacturing to other countries where we can get it done more cheaply. And it was a bad move. The government should have intervened, but they didn't. And so now we don't have a lot of manufacturing. And China can make things we no longer know how to make. And so it doesn't matter how many tariffs Trump puts on there, people are still going to be forced to pay for these Chinese products. And I don't really think it's going to change our trade imbalance all that much because we're still having to buy those products from China, and we don't have anything to sell that they want to buy. Is what it comes down to. I just saw an article on Fox here during the commercial break where Wall Street traders are saying that this latest round of tariffs is a bad idea.
Well, what it's going to do, and it is doing, is forcing companies to come back here because it's no longer profitable to build in China because of the tariffs. And that way we'll regain our manufacturing base and our expertise. We won't get it back any other way. And so it is going to be, it's going to be uncomfortable for a while because you're right, we don't have the manufacturing, but the way we get it back is to raise tariffs and force it to come back.
Well, I certainly hope it works on out here because you can't have a strong national economy without strong manufacturing. Part of the problem, of course, is going to be luring people back who know how to manufacture, who know how to set up factories, because they've all been lured away to other countries where they're treated like gold. And we're seeing it here, certainly with all the problems we have with our weapons systems. We seem to have lost a lot of that key knowledge on how to manufacture a proper product.
We're like a third world nation now. We mainly ship raw materials to places like China.
You're absolutely right.
It's going to be uncomfortable, but we have to get it back. We have to get that stuff back.
Well, I agree, and I think the best way that we're going to get our manufacturing back is not just to focus on recovering industries that manufacture today's products. I think we need to invest in a major technological leap forward so that the United States can make a product nobody else on the world knows how to make. And it'll be boom times then. One of the biggest mistakes we made, we had this fantastic technology advantage coming out of the Apollo moon programs, and we should have used it to basically stimulate American companies. And obviously a lot of companies in Silicon Valley took advantage of that. But instead, a lot of companies that acquired the rights to these various technologies, they sent it over to other countries to manufacture. Those other countries learned how the technology works, and it basically leaked on out. We should have kept all of that technological treasure for ourselves. After all, we, the American people, paid for it all. And this is why I'm a supporter of the space program, because we need a civilian technology incubator to come up with the next big thing that will allow us to jumpstart our industry and our economy.
Sounds good to me. Thanks a lot.
All right, thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go. Now, over in California, Governor Moonbeam is saying that the state of California is going to launch its own satellite into orbit to battle climate change. And basically, he made the announcement at the conclusion of a 2-day climate summit he organized in San Francisco, which, by the way, saw the number of corporate jets at the San Francisco airport go up by 1/3, belching all kinds of hot carbon emissions there. So Governor Brown says state officials will work with the San Francisco-based company Planet Labs to develop a satellite to track climate change causing pollutants. Now, he might want to check with NASA first, because NASA has now confirmed from February of 2016 to February of this year, the average temperature of the Earth declined 0.5 degrees centigrade. So this is NASA coming on out and saying, yes, in point of fact, the Earth is cooling. All right. Over at SpaceX, they're doing some amazing things. Apparently, they are setting up to fly a private passenger around the moon on its giant BFR rocket spaceship combo. Apparently, this has just been announced, and Elon Musk is going to fill in more details. Actually, today, we're going to have a webcast. Now, they haven't released who the private space explorer's identity. Obviously, it's going to be somebody who's got a lot of money. But they're just going to loop him around the moon or her and bring them back. And boy, would that not be a fun trip to be on. Okay. Boy, sometimes you have to look at some of these environmental activists or animal rights activists and realize they don't really think about what they're doing. Apparently, over in Germany, there were 4 cows that were freed from their pens at an organic farm by German animal rights activists and promptly gorged themselves on the available feed pile and died. They literally ate themselves to death. Another 40 cows are in critical condition after they ate up to 10 kilograms of feed at the Leibenwalder Agrar farm in the state of Brandenburg. And it's thought the suspects, who are thought to be animal rights activists, trespassed onto the farm and released the dairy cows and calves between Saturday night and Sunday morning. So, well done, animal rights activists. You've killed 4. You've made the rest of them sick. Pat yourself on the back for that one here. Now, this is an interesting little story because this is actually an issue out here in Hawaii. One of the more spectacular fish that you will see around the reefs is a lionfish, and it's native to the South Pacific and the Indian Oceans. They've become a serious problem over in the Western Atlantic and the Caribbean because it's basically an invasive species. Nobody knows how they got over there, but they did, and there are no natural predators over in the Caribbean and Western Atlantic. So the lionfish are breeding at an astonishing rate and putting additional stress on coral reefs. And so undergraduate students at Worcester Polytechnic Institute have built or are building an autonomous underwater robot that goes on out and hunts the lionfish. So this robot they're putting together, and they'll put it in the water, and it's got some kind of a power supply where it just swims around, and it's got vision systems that will identify a lionfish. And at that point, it is harpooned and brought to the surface. That's kind of cool. It's a creative solution there. I know this is kind of an old story, but as you know, there was this big issue over an air leak on the International Space Station, not actually on the space station itself, but an attached Russian Soyuz MS-9 spacecraft. And at first everybody thought it was a meteor strike, and they went on out and took a look and discovered somebody had drilled a hole in the hull. In fact, they could see the scratches from a couple of false starts. It looked like whoever did it was very shaky or weightless. And then, of course, the U.S. came back and said, well, obviously the hole was drilled during assembly, and Russia came on back and said, no, the hull was drilled when the spacecraft was completely assembled, and they're not sure whether it was before launch or after launch, but it is a mystery. And there's a lot of concern that the hole may have been drilled to precipitate an earlier return to Earth for one of the ISS astronauts who's apparently got a medical issue that they're trying to deal with. Over in Japan, they have, for the first time, confirmed that a Fukushima nuclear plant worker has died from radiation poisoning. And this man, aged in his 50s, developed lung cancer after he was involved in the emergency cleanup work at the plant following the tsunami. Health, Labor, and Welfare Ministry of Japan ruled compensation should be paid to the family of the man who died. Well, I would certainly hope so. There is a very troubling bill making its way through the Senate, and it would basically compel NASA to cooperate with Israel's space agency. And the reason this is of a concern is because Israel's space agency has a long history of espionage against the United States. And I understand our Congress is bought and paid for, but it just seems like, especially since 9/11, they're just giving everything away to Israel. So apparently this provision for NASA to just be good friends with Israel's space agency is tucked within the bill titled the United States Israel Security Assistance Authorization Act of 2018, which also provides Israel with $38 billion in U.S. military aid over a 10-year period, the largest military aid package in U.S. history, and every penny of it illegal under the Symington Amendment to the Foreign Appropriations Act, the Glenn Act, because of Israel's nuclear weapons. Okay, out here in Hawaii, things are settling down. We've had our storms go over. We had our flooding out in Kauai. We've had our volcano, which is now cooling down, and they're starting to reopen portions of Volcanoes National Park. The rangers are being very, very careful that they're opening up areas where the ground is really solid. Because I've mentioned to you before how it can get very deceptive. What looks like solid ground can be just a thin layer of solidified lava over a live lava flow, and you don't want to walk on that here. Now, one of the museums up at the top of the volcano, the Jagger Museum, is not going to reopen. It's going to have to be demolished. It suffered quite a bit of damage during that whole Kilauea collapse. Okay. And interestingly enough, Congress is looking at reopening the United States to supersonic aircraft. Now, the U.S. has banned domestic commercial supersonic aviation for 4 decades. When the Concorde was flying, they would fly supersonic across the ocean. Then they would have to slow down before entering American airspace. But Congress is now looking at the possibility of saying, let's have supersonic air travel. And we understand there are a lot of countries that are looking at building the follow-on to the Concorde, which would be very interesting. Anyways, I mentioned before the evacuation notice for Hawaii has been lifted. All the people are being allowed to go back in to where the lava finally wound up and see what is left. And following up again on that Soyuz story, this was out of place on my talking points. Members of the Special Commission of Russia's Federal Space Agency, Roscosmos, investigating into the causes of the recent depressurization of the Soyuz MS-09, have come to the conclusion that American astronauts could intentionally drill a hole in the coatings to bring back their sick colleague back to Earth ahead of schedule. Yeah, this is where we saw this. And apparently Roscosmos asked NASA to provide health reports for U.S. astronauts and the data from the video cameras. Now, chances to obtain this information are very small because this information is considered as medical secrecy. But if the above version of the incident were to be confirmed, it's going to sink Russian-American relations even further. I've been hearing talk from a lot of people that the United States may simply abandon the International Space Station. They're tired of having to pay Russia to take the astronauts up there. It's been very expensive. But hopefully we're going to see these 2 private spacecraft from SpaceX and from Boeing that are finally going to give the United States back its ability to loft astronauts into orbit. We're going to take a break for commercials. Back with the last segment of our program after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and getting an update now from the situation in Syria. And according to Russia Today, yes, it was an Israeli attack against Syria using F-16s, and here is where things are going to start spiraling out of control. Apparently, there was a Russian Ilyushin-20 aircraft with 14 passengers on board that vanished from the radar screens during Israel's attack. Now, it's entirely possible the plane just crashed for mechanical reasons, but if Israel shot down this Russian aircraft, things are going to get really tense really quickly. All right, let's take a phone call here from Daniel in British Columbia. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, aloha, Mike. I'll let you get back to the finishing your talking points at the end of the show here. But I heard on Texas radio station this morning that they're announcing about 1,000 manufacturing jobs. So, unfortunately, it's for Lockheed Martin. So that's how you're making America great again, by bombing the crap out of Iran and Syria and creating more refugees. I mean, this whole thing's a mess. All right, I'll let you get back to your show.
All right, thanks an awful lot there. And yeah, I mean, the military contractors, they're hiring like crazy. They know World War's on its way, and they're gearing up. It's amazing here. So getting on back to Syria, apparently this was a fairly serious attack on Syria, and they were targeting the Russian base at Khmeimim and the Russian harbor at Tartus. Now, supposedly, the Syrian air defense system succeeded in downing most of the incoming rockets, but again, this is a serious escalation for Israel to have done this. And if they did shoot down that Russian Ilyushin-20, Russia's going to have to respond. There's going to have to be a response. Putin is facing a lot of pressure back home from his own people that he needs to stand up for Russia. So I'm sure that they're going to find the remains of that aircraft and take a very careful look and confirm that it was shot down and not just a mechanical failure before they do anything. Okay, just somebody, somebody just sent me the same story here. Russian plane disappears from radars during Israeli attack on Syria's Latakia. So, it's on. There's nothing else we can say. It's on. And again, it looks like Israel is behind all of this. And we could see this thing just explode out of control. Absolutely. All right, there's the music. Time for me to get on out of here. I got to do Jim Goddard's show up in Vancouver. Please stay tuned for John Stadmiller. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you. Please take what you learn here, share it with everybody that you know. Don't use corporate social media. It's all being filtered. It's completely useless over there unless you're into funny cat videos. Use email, face-to-face, whatever. But just get the word out there and keep on pushing the story that corporate social media is in fact censoring all conservatives to try and swing the election this November. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.